Are you ready? Are you shitting down?
The Schein on Podcast.
The Schein on Podcast.
The Schein on Podcast, Season 5.
We're going to pull back the curtain on the divorce process. It's fun, insightful, tremendous guests. They're topics that far too often many people shy away from. But not here on the Schein on Podcast.
Episode 84 of the Schein on Podcast. I'm Evan Schein. We have an absolute tremendous episode this week. I sit down with Alison Lefkowitz, a professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology and author of Strange Bedfellows, Marriage in the Age of Women's Liberation, Politics, and Culture in Modern America. Alison's research explores the intersections of marriage, law, gender, politics, and social change, examining how legal frameworks shape relationships and societal norms. Dave, you were a guy and no stranger to shaping relationships and societal norms. How are you?
I'm good. Among other things I do, I suppose. I'm great. Great. Looking forward to a great conversation with the professor. It's time we put our thinking caps on for this one.
And Dave, you know what I'm looking forward to?
What's that?
I'm looking forward to saying goodbye to this cold weather. I'm tired of the cold. I'm tired of the snow in the Northeast. Give me spring. Give me longer days of sunlight and daylight savings. Give me March Madness. Give me the start of baseball season. I got to tell you, I need February to end. I just need it to end like now.
Yeah, I'm sick of wearing boots everywhere I go. You know, it's either slush, ice, snow. I'm ready to put my tennis shoes on. I'm ready to put my high tops on. I'm ready for some Cracker Jacks, peanuts, and baseball.
And Dave, as you always do, let's fire it up on the docket.
Let's do it.
And now, let's see what's on the docket.
A couple of real interesting items on the docket, Evan. First one from an unusual source. In fact, it comes to us from Barstool Sports.
Item 1.
Headline reads, a smart, brave woman is divorcing her husband for booing Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl. She says, it's not about the booing, it's what it represents. Your thoughts on this one?
I love it. And Dave, I got to tell you, it's never about the booing. It's always about what it represents. And I have to tell you, if you booed Taylor Swift, you know what? You might be next. You might be next when it comes to, is your marriage going to last or is it not? And that famous question, should I stay or should I go? All you have to do to find out the answer. You don't have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for a coach or a therapist to help you figure it out. You put on your favorite Taylor Swift song. You put on Shake It Off. You put on Your Wildest Dreams. And if your spouse boos or your spouse says, oh, I got to change the channel, you know what? That's your answer. But if you boo Taylor Swift, you know what? There's a problem.
Yeah, I knew a writer once who said he could never date anyone who didn't cry at the end of the movie Field of Dreams. Well, maybe for the female set, this is their litmus test. You cross Taylor at your own peril. So not surprised. And the author on Barstool Sports agrees with us. So,
but Dave, look, let's be honest here. There might be some other issues here.
You think?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, you know what? There's some deeper issues than whether or not your spouse decided to boo Taylor Swift.
I think you're right. But maybe that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And maybe that was one little moment that the missus couldn't shake off.
Yeah, you know what? It wasn't the affair, right? The affair, they were good with. It was the fact that they couldn't get on board with Shake It Off. Who doesn't like Shake It Off?
No man alive. I don't know. That song always puts me in a great mood. I'll lip sync to it anytime. And he should have known that.
And Dave, as I said before in the podcast, we're just living in a Taylor Swift world.
That's right. All right, let's move on.
Item 2.
Item 2 comes to us from Slate.com. And the question posed by the author is, post-divorce, am I allowed to just live enraged? She provides notes on how to live with anger, but without letting it consume you. What do you think about this one, Evan?
Dave, here's the thing about divorce. No one on the outside can tell you how to feel, right? No one on the outside can say you should think differently, you should feel differently. No one is walking in your shoes. If you want to live with anger, live with anger. You want to live with all sorts of different emotions, live with all sorts of different emotions. Now, let's take a step back. Do I think it's healthy for you to live being enraged? No. Do I think it's healthy for you to live with the weight of your divorce on your shoulders? No. Do I think it's healthy for you to live with resentment and second guessing things? Of course not. But at the end of the day, I think you need to learn how to process that, how to channel the feeling of anger and turn it into something positive. Do I think you're allowed to live however you want? Of course. Do I think it's particularly healthy? I don't. What's your thought?
Yeah, same. I mean, when my marriage ended, I kind of presumed that my ex would not care for me for a long time. And as it happened, she was more mature than I gave her credit for. And we're on good terms now, which is great. But I think different for every person. It's a wound. The wound takes time to heal. And so if this author is sort of asking permission, can I still live with hate? Well, yeah, but I'm with you. In the long time, over the years, the months and years to come, it will eat at you. And eventually, I hope this person gets to a day when they say, you know what, what's the point? Got to move on.
Dave, let me ask you a question. When I was reading this article, what I started thinking about was, do people going through a divorce, do they not give themselves permission to heal? Is there such a push in society to get back out there, to get back to dating, to get over it, to move on, to see the light at the end of the tunnel? Is there such a push for that to happen super quickly where we don't experience certain feelings of anger, of grief, of resentment, and perhaps it might be healthier in the long run for that person if they allowed themselves to feel a certain way?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that pressure comes from popular culture and from all the apps that are out there and the ways there are to meet people. Now it seems like it's not a question of whether you use a dating app to meet someone. It's which one, because there are dozens. Not only that, but every other reality show is about dating. It's like, look at all these people dating, and some of them are finding love, and look at that, and I'm really, really rooting for these kids. So reality is it takes time, and as many guests on this podcast have shared with us, that it's not plug and play. It's not open up an app, meet someone, and there you go. There's your new partner. It's dealing with a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, and what's the rush? I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe you do want to find your perfect person and you're liberated from the marriage, which wasn't a good one. But man, take your time. Watch some dating shows first, maybe, before you actually do the actual dating. Maybe you'll learn a few things, right?
Hey, when you talk dating, we listen.
Maybe you shouldn't. All right, we move on, Evan, to everyone's favorite, relatively new feature on the podcast, Overrated or Underrated?
Overrated.
Or underrated.
We take several items from who knows where and provide them to Evan to tell us if they're underrated or overrated. Some will be legally related, some won't. We'll start with the legal ones. Depositions. Overrated or underrated? Depositions, I think, probably misunderstood by much of the lay public. Much of people out there, they think it's like a trial. It's not really a trial. It's a mini trial. It's in someone's office. They're confused. Depositions, overrated or underrated?
You're exactly right. Maybe we should have a new category, misunderstood, but it is misunderstood, and it's also for that reason underrated. First, let's understand what a deposition is. It's a discovery mechanism where, as an attorney, you're able to ask the other spouse. Those are called party depositions, questions under oath with a court reporter. And then there's non-party depositions. In New York, depositions are limited to financial information. In other states or even other jurisdictions, in New York, you can ask questions on custody, on parenting, and you take depositions for all sorts of reasons. Education, to learn about the case, to develop a theme of the case. And the second reason is that you can lock someone into sworn testimony which, if the case proceeds, you can use the deposition transcript to impeach that person's credibility. But I'm going to give you a third reason. And this is why I love depositions, because depositions can help settle cases. I have settled depositions shortly after taking someone's deposition because I'm more knowledgeable and I have more information, or I've settled cases during depositions because you can catch someone in a lie, in a misrepresentation, where that light bulb, that aha moment goes off for the other side. And they say, look, you know what? I don't really want to go down this rabbit hole. Let me be in a position to settle the case. So for those reasons, Dave, depositions are underrated.
Underrated.
Well, score one for the depositions. Next item for overrated, underrated, divorce coaches. We featured many of them on this show. Are they overrated or underrated?
Dave, they're absolutely underrated. I'm not just saying that because they have been featured on the show, but I want to expand this even broader. Coaches in general are underrated. Look, I've always said, and I'll say it again, divorce is a true team sport. And what makes a team sport really go, it's the people by your side. It's the coach. It's the quarterback. It's the person taking the lead on your case to help you move through the process. And I do want to use this as an opportunity to feature all the Schein on podcast guests who are coaches, who are financial coaches, divorce coaches. Rhonda Nordyke is absolutely tremendous. She's a financial coach, a financial strategist who is someone who stands out to me as being an instrumental part of my client's divorce journey, my client's divorce process, working hand in hand with my client as they navigate the ups and downs of divorce. And divorce is hard. There are some really, really dark days where you just don't want to deal with it. You don't want to speak to your attorney. You don't want to deal with the process, and having that person to give you that push to pick you up in those dark moments, that's what a coach does. And Dave, for those reasons, divorce coaches are underrated.
Underrated.
We move from the sublime to the ridiculous because now we're going to ask you overrated or underrated yoga. And not yoga pants, not yoga wear, but the actual practice, the ancient practice of yoga. Evan, overrated or underrated?
Dave, yoga is underrated.
Oh,
And that's for everyone, not if you're just going through a divorce. Look, how can anyone not love a good 45-minute yoga session? How can anyone not love a good downward dog, a good warrior pose? It's an opportunity for you to feel better, relax your mind, clear your thoughts, which happens after yoga. And sure, maybe you go to a session and you're hesitant, you're on the fence as to whether you want to give it a second chance. Do it, stick with it, practice, perfect it. It is an opportunity to put your cell phone down and focus on yourself, your mind, your thoughts. I encourage all my clients, do something for them, whether it's running, whether it's boxing, whether it's yoga. I think it is so incredibly important in this day and age with cell phones and social media and everybody going 1,000 miles a minute to take a step back. And it could be yoga. And if it is, great. But if it's something else where you do something for you, it is so important. So yoga is underrated.
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 Next on overrated or underrated, AirPods, the device that Apple has thrust upon us. And now everyone's got their AirPods until they lose them, of course. AirPods, underrated or overrated?
Dave, AirPods are absolutely overrated. I hate AirPods. First, they're always falling out of my ears, right?
Yep.
Second, I am losing them. Unless someone could figure out how to put a leash on my AirPods or a tracking device, the use of wireless headphones will continue to be overrated. I am losing them constantly. I take them out of my ears. I don't put them back in the case. I put them on my desk. The case is somewhere else. And again, maybe that's a me issue.
Yeah.
I am open to it being a me issue. I am just not good at taking the AirPods, putting them back in its case, and nobody has a solution. And the answer can't be, Evan, we'll keep spending $149.99 on getting new AirPods. I've done that before. I'm probably on, with no exaggeration, my 15th or 16th pair of AirPods. My wife keeps naming them for me. Don't lose this pair. Don't lose it. Like, she keeps giving it a funny name. It doesn't help because guess what, Dave? I keep losing them. And the other thing I want to say about AirPods, and quite frankly, people look ridiculous. First off, how many times, and we've all been there, do you think someone's talking to you?
Right.
And they're not, because they're just on a conversation. The problem is you can't see the AirPods. So
True.
you think someone's talking to you. And how many times do we say, are you talking to me? No, I'm not talking to you. They're just on the phone, listening to music, singing along, or having other conversations. People look absolutely nuts. And guess what? If you had the wires, you would know that the person either is or is not talking to you. And for those reasons, AirPods are overrated.
Overrated. Wow. Excellent rant. And I mostly agree. I've been able to hang on to the pair that I have now for at least a few months. But I think when they first came out, I think Jimmy Fallon had a funny bit where he said, look, Apple just came up with these new tiny little AirPods that are designed to, and oh my God, I just lost them. That's it. Lost them.
It happens. You lose them all the time. And then the problem is when you mix and match them, you can hear out of your left ear, but you can't hear out of the right ear. And when you have 15 or 16 pairs of AirPods, good luck trying to figure out which ones are for the case. It's a mess, Dave. It's a mess.
It ain't easy. It ain't easy.
AirPods.
Final item for overrated, underrated. The country needs to know Attorney Schein's position on fanny packs. Fanny packs, Evan. Overrated or underrated?
You know, Dave, out of all the ones we've done today, this might be the hardest. And I thought about this, and I've gone back and forth. And my final answer, underrated. If you
Really?
would have asked me this question years ago, when I was in my 20s, probably would have given you an overrated. Who the hell wears a fanny pack, right? I got to tell you, not only are they practical, not only could you put stuff in it, for someone who loses things, it is a way to put on the fanny pack. And then back in the day, it was, well, they're not stylish. They're not fashionable. Have you opened your eyes? I mean, there are some fanny packs that are costing a few $100s. I mean, these fanny packs, they're decked out. They come in leather. They come in all sorts of different materials. You want to get a monogram? You can monogram your fanny pack. You'll never lose anything again. So not only is it practical, if you have kids, if you don't want to lose things, it's a fashion statement. Dave, just the other day, I said to someone, I love your fanny pack. I mean, it's now a fashionable statement. Fanny packs are back. They're in. They're an accessory. And if you don't have a fanny pack, you should get one. Hey, you're a fanny pack guy.
No, only when I travel abroad, which doesn't happen that often, but they're a godsend when you're traveling abroad because you're constantly
godsend. You heard it from producer Dave.
You're constantly in fear of losing your passport and being trapped in some foreign country forever. So that you need it then. I'm like you. I lose things constantly. My solution is I have a backpack that fits my laptops and then different compartments for everything. So as a result, when I'm looking for something, I have to check 5 or 6 different compartments because I never remember which one it goes in. So you know what?
I do like a good backpack.
Backpack is good too. Functional. That gets the job done. But I might be in the market for a fanny pack. You might have turned me around on this one, Evan. So what a day.
I can see you at Fenway Park this year.
Sure.
You know, watching your Red Sox, we're rocking a, DY fanny pack, monogrammed. In fact, that might be my next holiday gift for you.
Oh, well, okay, put it on the list. Yeah. At Fenway Park, go, yeah, that's a wicked good fanny pack you got there. You hear that all the time. All the time.
Our feature guest on the Schein podcast this week is Alison Lefkowitz, professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology and author of the book Strange Bedfellows, Marriage in the Age of Women's Liberation, Politics and Culture in Modern America. Alison, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Alison, what initially sparked your interest in the intersection of marriage, law, gender, politics?
Great question. I don't know if all people answer this like historians, but the way I came to this is actually I was trying to do a master's thesis on war marriage. And that was because my grandparents had eloped right before the Korean War. They snuck out at 6 a.m. and then went and got married. And then my grandpa shipped out. And I was like, oh, how do I research these things? And one of the ideas I had was to check divorce records. And so I did find some in the divorce records, and I did write a master's paper on that. But then I was just like, oh, these divorce records are fascinating. And it sort of spun out from that, seeing both like people's really intimate, crazy personal stories, but also that they had to conform to like the legal parameters that especially Illinois at that time had in place. It was such an interesting combination of like people's everyday lives and also these like big structures that they had to operate under if they wanted to divorce at that time.
Really interesting story. And Alison, your book covers how removing gender roles from marriage reshapes politics. If we
Yeah.
could rip up all the laws about marriage and we can start over, what would the construct of marriage look like to you?
Oh man, that's no one's ever offered that to me before, but I love that. I
I'm
love
giving you
that
the
bargain.
platform. I'm giving you the forum.
I think that part of the problem with marriage laws today is one that we still treat them like they are a social safety net for people, and they're really not a social safety net for most people. So I think honestly, what I would do is I would create a social safety net that's totally apart from marriage that you should just get because you live here in the United States. And then marriage could be more of a cultural or religious or whatever your perspective about what marriage is. It could be that without people having to depend on it for their health insurance or, other sort of access to Social Security or things like that. So that would be my ideal version. But if we didn't get that ideal version, I think still having a version where there were, I sort of say in the book that marriage for poor people is kind of all obligations, and marriage for wealthier people really is about protection of their property. And I think just having something that protects everybody kind of equally would be the version that I would want the most.
I love that. Alison, what role do you think technology plays in shaping modern marriages and also family structures and dynamics?
Oh, that's a great question. I've definitely heard that there's a lot more technology in divorce courts than there used to be, that people's text chains, that their bank records, that their WhatsApp accounts, are all being used as evidence in thinking about one, the places where people still get fault divorces, that's coming in, but also just the money that one of the things that's the problem is that people have kind of always tried to hide money from each other when they're going through a divorce, and that is hopefully a little bit harder to do with technological changes, but it may also make it easier to hide money. And
Well,
I've,
that's true.
I've
There's
heard,
always two sides to the coin, right?
yeah, I've heard both kinds of stories. So, but then also people are meeting through technology too. So the way that marriages start so often are coming on dating apps as opposed to meeting at a happy hour at a bar or meeting at work. So I think technology is changing people's relationships from start to finish in sometimes expected ways and sometimes very unexpected ways.
How have concepts of masculinity and femininity influenced legal rulings on marriage, and are they evolving or just shifting in form?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, because I'm a historian, I have a sort of long view of this, which is that the role of husband and wife were very legally distinct for a long time, really into the late 20th century. And part of the era that I study is looking at how some of those things got dismantled. So only husbands in most states had the obligation to care financially for their spouses. That didn't mean that all did, or even that courts forced them all to, but it was exclusively their role. But they also had a lot of legal control over their wives. They could legally sexually assault their wives. They could, if a wife cheated, she had a lot more to lose in a divorce court than a husband did. And the changes that I trace addressed a lot of that. So marital rape was criminalized, for example. And the obligation to pay alimony was made gender neutral by the Supreme Court in the late 70s as well. But then on the state level, sometimes some of these rules just went away entirely. And I think one of the most interesting things I found in my book was that we think of all these changes to marriage at that time as coming from feminists, but there's a sort of less known aspect where these smaller divorce men's groups started lobbying and suing state governments and picketing outside city halls, just like feminists were. And I think they've had a pretty profound effect on marriage law since that time. So there is still alimony. People still get it, but fewer people get it. And it's for a much shorter amount of time than it used to be, where wives would get alimony until they remarried or they died in some cases in the post-war period. And that's only very rarely true these days. And that's partly because of feminists, but I think it's also partly because of men's rights activists. Both those groups sort of campaigning state legislatures and state courts to think differently about men's and women's roles. So today, I think we have inherited some of those ideas, but not fully. And if you look at some activists now, there's calls to roll back fault divorce and bring back breadwinning and homemaking. And our laws don't really reflect that reality anymore. And even the calls to bring back fault divorce itself isn't going to bring back some of the other stuff that came with it, like alimony, for example, but also even welfare. The welfare that was in place back then is gone. So,
and obviously over the past 9 months with, the election and politics and, different people having a voice on it, right? There have definitely been people who are looking to make divorce a fault. Basically, you need fault in order to get divorced. And it is and has been long overdue. Obviously, I'm in New York, and as a divorce attorney, New York was one of the last states. But to even roll that back, I mean, talk for a moment about what the impact would be if that even became a reality, where divorce went from no fault to now having to prove fault in order to get out of a marriage and a relationship that arguably was abusive or toxic. Talk to us for a moment about what that would look like and the real concerns associated with something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so fault divorce could look different ways, but one of the problems with fault divorce is that states got to decide what counted as a fault. So some states did have provisions for physical abuse or emotional abuse. But even those states, my favorite example was Illinois. You had to have 2 people witness physical abuse to qualify for that fault. Abuse happens in private so often. So the idea that you would need 2 witnesses makes it incredibly tough to think about all those victims who wouldn't be able to access divorce. And then some states didn't have that provision at all. So even if your spouse was abusive, you couldn't get divorced. The other thing that I think people don't think about is that one of the ways that fault divorce worked was that one and only one person could be at fault, and also that it was up to the judge to determine that. So if you and your spouse kind of both wanted to get divorced, and you said, okay, you be the one at fault, and the other spouse said, sure, I'll be the one at fault. And if the judge found that out, he could just say, nope, you guys are still married. I'm not granting this divorce. This is collusion, or you guys are both at fault. So even in cases where there is an extreme abuse, I think that people don't want to see marriages that neither of them want to be in anymore. And that would be, if we restore fault laws as they used to be, that would be the case for those people. So,
Alison, how has your research influenced your own personal views on marriage or family? And do you look at the institution of marriage differently now, given what you do?
yeah, that's a great question too. I definitely do. I do think that it is, there are more defects in the institution than I had realized. And even once we have worked really hard to fix some of them, for example, criminalizing marital rape, the actual on the ground implementation of that is that sometimes there are differences in like how long you can go to the state and say this happened. Like you have X amount of time if you're married and a smaller amount or in a longer amount of time if you're not married. But even just the ways that it leaves the ends of marriages still leave a lot of people in the lurch. And divorce is hard no matter what, right? You've combined resources and worked together to have a family, and now you have to split the same amount of resources into two different households and still take care of the same amount of people, but with more expenses and more costs and all the emotional things that come with splitting up. So I think it's always going to be a tough situation, but the distribution of those resources is still tough. And I think that's led to what other scholars have called the povertization of women, just women and children becoming more poor over time. And that's still with us today. There's still a lot of really poor children who simply don't have access to resources that they had when their parents were married and probably won't, right? And in the past, sometimes the state stepped in to help those families. And with the end of welfare as we know it, that's a much more temporary and fragile system as well. So, I think marriage can still be a really lovely personal relationship and spiritual, but I do think the ways that it's tangled up in the state has become a real problem and one that we should really think about looking at again.
If you were to write a follow-up of your book, Strange Bedfellows, what would you want to explore?
That's a great question. Partly, I think I would like to explore, this is a constantly moving target, of course, but it does seem like there are new policies and new problems that are cropping up. So, for example, in Texas right now, allegedly, there are calls for boyfriends and husbands to report their wives if they have tried to seek abortions, right? And those sorts of new developments in terms of like what marriage looks like and what that partnership looks like, I think could be really fascinating. But also, a bit of a bummer too, because it does seem like a lot of the progress that was made in the late 20th century is at risk. And even that progress wasn't, as far as it needed to go. So it could be a little bit of a bleak follow-up. That said, I am working on a new project about sex across class lines, which
Tell us about it.
The literal follow-up. It's not very far along, but thinking about how both the law and culture really thinks about someone who's wealthier getting together with someone who's poorer. And there's actually a lot of marriage law and a lot of other kinds of laws that manage that. So in some ways, I am doing a little bit of a sequel. I'm looking at prenup law and what happens in wills and alimony again, sexual harassment, all those things of, what do we do how do we think about it as a society when someone who's wealthy gets together with someone who's not wealthy? And kind of what I think I'll end up arguing is that we as Americans used to be much more comfortable with it, and the law protected it more, and that it's only over time that we've become less comfortable with people marrying or having sexual relationships with people who are poorer than them.
No, I'm happy for you. That's fantastic. And when you're finished with the book, obviously we'd love to take a read, have you back on the Schein podcast to talk
Oh,
about
that'd
it.
be great.
And Alison, keep your history hat on for a moment.
Oh, sure.
What's a lesser known historical figure or a moment in marriage or family law that you think deserves more attention than we give it?
Interesting. Well, I did mention the men's rights activists from the 70s, and one of the activists who was really kind of dynamic at that time was a guy named Charles Metz, and he started this organization that provided both, kind of moral support for divorced men, which I think is great, but then also a lot of lobbying to try to like shed any responsibilities that ex-husbands had toward their wives and even children. And so it ended up being a really mixed legacy of some of the things he campaigned for kind of came to fruition, and others did not. So I have that in a chapter in my book, but also a historian named Teresa Eicher is working on a book on those groups over a longer period of time. So maybe check her out for when that book comes out too. I think
Absolutely.
it'll be a great book.
Absolutely, definitely will. And Alison, you've studied how lawmakers shape marriage, but what about pop culture? Do you see film, TV, or music reflecting or resisting these legal shifts?
Yeah, both. That's a fun thing about pop culture, right? You can get
true.
amazing work from both perspectives. I mean, there was so much pressure to conform to this sort of traditional family in pop culture, and you see it in everything from like the Dick Van Dyke Show, where Mary Tyler Moore started, to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was about her not being married and like what
It's true. It's a great
how
reference.
she felt about that, right? But you could also get documents from groups that are less well known. So, for example, there's this movie called Claudine that James Earl Jones was in when he was very young, and it's about a Black woman who was receiving welfare benefits, but of course they weren't sufficient, and she both had a job that she wasn't supposed to have and also had a boyfriend she wasn't supposed to have, who is James Earl Jones. And a lot of the movie is about kind of her struggles to make ends meet during that time, and also her sort of frustration with how the system treated her and her kids, sending in a social worker to check for any boyfriends, and eventually finding James Earl Jones hiding in her house. And I think you could get a really good sense of the frustration that women on welfare had at the time, that she was in trouble for having a boyfriend. She never got in trouble for having the job. But neither of those things mattered because she did, it was too hard to make ends meet on what she was getting with the kids she had. So there were lots of restrictions, and also none of the sort of like satisfying life for your kids that you would hope you would get from the welfare system at the time. So that kind of pop culture, I think, is a critique of what was in place at the time, and a critique of the welfare system and how overbearing it could be, while at the same time a celebration of what people were going through and managing to get through when they did face extreme poverty.
Alison, do you think there will be a day when marriage is completely different? Or are we headed in the direction where marriage one day might be gone altogether?
Oh, fascinating. Entirely possible, right? Especially if you look at places that have fewer benefits tied to the marriage relationship. It does seem like there's both less importance put on marriage and also less pressure put on marriage. So that sounds kind of freeing to me, actually, in a a better case scenario. Um, but it could be that marriage totally goes away because of that. That if people don't have the religious impulse to marry anymore, and also not the financial pressure to marry anymore, then absolutely it could go away. But I think one of the things that's a little bit more likely is a lot of historians have worked on the briefs for marriage equality. Um, and one of the arguments against marriage equality was always, oh, we've had this institution that's been the same for millennia. And what the historians repeatedly have shown is that marriage has changed so much over those millennia, and it served different purposes and had different roles for men and women to play within it, and different roles for the children within those marriages. Um, so my bet is that uh, it'll just change, and it'll be something different that supplies something different for people rather than totally disappearing.
Allison, I'm going to give you a blank slate. I want you to imagine for a moment that you were curating a museum exhibit about the history of marriage law. Give us an artifact. If you had one artifact that you would include as an exhibit, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. Huh. Well, I guess I'll go with the easiest answer, which is the image I chose for the front of my book, which was from the first ever issue of Ms. Magazine. And it's a picture, it's an illustration of a woman sort of in a nightgown, so not like fully clothed, sitting inside a ring, like implied an engagement ring or a wedding ring, but shackled to the ring. And that is not a legal document at all, but I think it encapsulates like what some of the frustrations about marriage were among feminists at the time. And it's also just a really fun image. So that's why I chose it. But I think maybe a more representative one might be maybe California's no fault marriage law that they passed, just because I think that really launched such an extreme change to marriage and what it meant when it was put into place in 1970, that it led to a lot of the greater gender equality in marriage that we have today. But it also led to what legal scholar named Marianne Case has called thinner marriage, that people just owe each other less within a marriage. So that was the first one in the nation. Most states got one sometime after that. As you said, New York was really late in joining, but now New York's there too. So that's probably the most important, but it's a little less fun than a woman sitting in a wedding ring chained to it. So depends on what you're going for.
Exactly. Allison, what's one thing that you think of, or a question that keeps you up at night about marriage and gender and politics, and why?
I mean, the big scale stuff I think is really still true, that we rely on marriage for doing a lot of things that I think it's not built to do. That taking care of people, we need to look to bigger institutions than just a couple who like each other. But I think that the more immediate concern is these calls to go back to the breadwinner, homemaker, family model, in large part because the sort of economy that allowed that to happen is gone. So the version that we get, I think, is going to be much harder to sustain. It'll be fewer people will have it, but then you'll have fewer rights and less ability to navigate it if you are a homemaker. One of the problems that happened in the 70s was that people had spent decades of their lives being a homemaker, and then their husband asked them for divorce or just gave them a divorce through no fault divorce, and they had no work history, they had no education, they had kids still, and it was a really rough transition for a lot of people. And I think that was at a time when employment opportunities were high and wages were still a little bit better often for people. So if we go through that again in today's economy, one, I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to be breadwinners or homemakers. But then two, what happens when those relationships fall apart has even less protection than it did back in the 1950s and 60s.
That's a really good point. And Alison, now's the part of the podcast I want to bring on producer Dave for a fun segment we do on the podcast called They Said It.
Hi, Dave.
Hello. Yes, thank you for welcoming me back to the show. It is time for They Said It, so let's do it.
They said it.
They said it.
They said it.
Yes, on They Said It, I provide 3 quotes from famous people from history or from pop culture or who knows where, with quotations that have to do with something that we hope will interest Alison. And let's start off on the light side. The following quote comes to us from Matt Groening, who is the creator of The Simpsons. The Simpsons, a perfectly functional American family, of course. He had the following to say: families are about love overcoming emotional torture. Alison, your thoughts on that quote, pro, con, or otherwise?
Pro. I am a huge fan of The Simpsons, and also this is a great quote. I think that this is one of the nice things about families, right, is that it is a form of coming together to help each other out. And of course, acknowledging all the emotional torture that sometimes goes along with that is an important part of understanding how this works. You can't go in going thinking that things will be totally perfect, or you will be very disappointed. So that's great.
Well put. If you can get both love and emotional torture in any episode of The Simpsons, of course.
That's right.
So at the risk of a painfully clumsily segue, we move from Matt Groening to French novelist Honoré de Balzac, who had the following to say: laws are spider webs through which the big flies pass and the little ones get caught. That from Balzac. Your thoughts on that one, Alison?
Oh, you're very good at finding these, because I do think that's a lot of what I'm hoping to capture in that last book, is that the reforms that we made to marriage really benefited the people who needed it the least, right? And the reforms that we need for the poor, for kids, for a lot of women, we're still working on. So laws can achieve a lot, but they can also keep a lot of inequalities in place. And it takes a lot more work and effort to really get to a version that will be more equitable.
Well put. We'll now move to one that I hope doesn't make you completely repeat yourself, although it is sort of a related sentiment. It comes from author Letty Cotton Pogrebin. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Letty. I apologize. She had the following to say: when men are oppressed, it's a tragedy. When women are oppressed, it's tradition. That's a tough one. It's a dark one, but I have a feeling that there's some truth in there. What do you think, Alison?
Yeah, I do think there's some truth in there. And even, if we think about laws again, especially traditional laws like coverture, that was the original legal basis for marriage in the US. The whole idea was that the husband's legal status covered his wife, that he acted on her behalf. And so it's literally tradition in the United States that women were under men legally. And so oppression's bad either way, but there is a longer tradition of it against women.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are always sad reminders that we still have a ways to go. And this isn't right on point, but just last night I was on a podcast and the subject of the film The Pelican Brief came out. It was that movie with Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington, based on the John Grisham book, of course. It came out in 1993, and they rewrote the script so that there would be no love interest between Denzel Washington and the Julia Roberts character, mainly because they didn't think America could take a black man kissing a white woman. That was in 1993. It doesn't feel like that long ago. Well, to you guys, I'm older than you guys, so it probably feels like a longer time to you, perhaps. But how much, at the risk of asking a broad question that will require a longer answer, Alison, were we still inching forward towards equality when it comes to the kind of things we've been talking about here? Is there still hope in the air, or are we actually going backwards?
I hope there's hope. And if you think even about the Pelican Brief, that was, a good generation after Loving v. Virginia, which had struck down laws that didn't allow interracial marriage in the
Right.
1960s. But Hollywood was still uncomfortable with having an interracial couple, it seems. I think that some of that has changed, and the rates of interracial marriage are higher than they were in the 60s and I believe the 90s. But there's still room for improvement, I'd say. And hopefully we get there where it's a thing that people are more comfortable with socially, and that we don't move in the opposite direction either. I haven't seen any calls to undo Loving, but Clarence Thomas has really been very skeptical about substantive due process, which is a whole other thing, but Loving v. Virginia comes out of that tradition as well. So I guess it's possible that that's in danger as well, but hopefully not. Hopefully we continue to move in the right direction in terms of interracial marriage. And I think we slowly have, if nothing else.
TV personality John Oliver offered Clarence Thomas $1 million a year and a souped-up RV mobile home if he would just step down from the bench. He has not accepted that offer yet.
I mean, a souped-up RV is a pretty good offer. I feel like you should.
I'm with you.
Seriously, I'd take it. All right. Well, Alison, terrific job. Thanks for playing along on They Said It. And Evan, back to you to wrap things up.
Dave, that was great. And Alison, this was great. You were fantastic. Loved having you on the podcast. Tell everybody where they can learn more about all the great stuff you're doing, and of course, pick up a copy of the book.
Great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here. The book is called Strange Bedfellows. It's published by University of Pennsylvania Press, so you can find it on their website or at your bookstore of choice. I am on Blue Sky, but I'm not very active, so you can look for me there, and maybe I'll get more active soon.
Fantastic, Alison. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.
Episode 84. What a show. Episode 84 is in the books. Tremendous guest. Alison Lefkowitz was tremendous. The Docket, brilliant as always. Overrated, underrated. What a fun segment. The comments and feedback on this segment have been tremendous. Keep sending in your comments, your questions, your thoughts for future guests. Send it in to producer Dave, who is the absolute best in the business. Dave, what a show.
Terrific show, Evan. Learned a lot from the professor, and on my way out shopping for fanny packs. I'll let you know if anything strikes my eye.
Dave, you're going to be a fanny pack guy soon enough. The listeners could check out the podcast and listen wherever you get your podcast. And of course, Pod 617. What a show. I'm Evan Schein, and I'll talk to you again real soon.